Hello everyone and welcome to Handmade Hero, the show where we code a complete game live on stream. We just got done with a little 4-Coder Friday, so we're starting a little late today. We're starting at like 4:22 instead of starting at 5:22 instead of starting at 5. So, sometimes you're late. In software development, things start late, they end even later. It's always a disaster. That's just how things go. That's just how things go. But we have some code to do today that we need to do. Basically, we played around yesterday and smushed our debug UI systems together because we had some like hacky stuff we were doing with the profile before, and we kind of put it in there. And so today, I'm not sure exactly what we're going to do. I think what I'd like to do is I'd like to clean up a few things in it since it's Friday. I don't really want to go too far down getting the profile interface working, because I think what next week should be about is getting some clean interfaces for like the profile and for switching things and stuff like that. So what I'd like to do today is clean up a few things. I'd like to clean up the way that we're doing our debug trees a little bit, and the way our interface stuff is done a little bit, so that we can have a few more advanced features in there and so that things are running a little bit more smoothly. So we're going to do some cleanup and some feature addition today, rather than focusing on sort of what I think is more of almost a design problem, because honestly I don't really know, and I mean like a UX design problem. I don't really know. I've never built a super capable profiler before. I've only just had like little readouts of like times, and now that we have like all this data about like when threads are doing what and all this stuff, I haven't really ever given the thought to like how do I make that something that's usable. And so next week, I think, will be us figuring that sort of stuff out. Like how can we make that a really nice little thing that we can view and use? All right. I'm going to just go ahead and jump right in here. Today is day 198. Day 197 source code is what I'm starting with today. So if you pre-order the game on handmadehero.org, you need to start with day 197 source code. Don't start with some other day's source code, because you'll be like, what's going on? Start with 197, because that's what I'm starting with right now. And you can see where we were at. It was pretty cool. You could go in here and you could edit these things where we just have like all these kind of weird, test things that we had put in there, and whatever they were, you could edit them, and you could do stuff like this where you could like change values by like dragging and all that sort of stuff. And you could also do things where, if you wanted to, you could open up like the profiler, and it would show things like the whole profiler data inside here. And you could even like change the size of the profiler, right? So we had like the ability to like, kind of drag things around, and you can kind of see it there. And you can see us taking too long because our debug collation kind of shoots right over the edge there. Oops. What can you, yeah, so we took a little too long. Our bad. Anyway, so, we've got that sort of stuff here, and you could see that you could have multiple of them and all that other good stuff, right? And everything kind of responds dynamically, and it's all nice and easy. And again, we're not trying to make a professional UI here or anything like that, but I am trying to show how easy it is. It's only been a few hours on the actual UI stuff, right? I'm just trying to show how easy it is that you can make some interactable things. You don't have to link some gigantic UI library into your game or anything. You can trivially have some perfectly usable debug UI in only just a few lines of code, really. And so that's kind of a nice thing. All right, so what I'd like to do now, the first thing I'd like to do is I want to make it so we can just tear off pieces of this thing. So for example, if I'm in the debugging thing and I have this by thread thing here, I want to be able to like grab it, and you can see like right now the only thing that it'll do is it'll just like turn on and off. What I want to be able to do is like grab this thing and drag it out here and have like that profiler or whatever it is. I want to have that thing throw up a little separate debug list or whatever, just something that allows me to do that kind of operation. And again, it's really not that hard to do something like that, so I just kind of wanted to show how easy it is to make some things that can have that kind of capability. All right, so here we go. So here we are in Handmade Debug. You can see it here. And the way that we've got our stuff structured is we have these debug variable groups, and then we have these debug variables. And what you can see here is that a debug variable itself actually stores the data that it's trying to edit, right? It is the actual debug variable. And the problem with that is it means that it's hard for us to put a debug variable in more than one place, right? What we would much rather do is have this be indirected in some way, because we'd like to be able to have every debug variable be referenceable from multiple places at once. So the only thing I really need to do to have that is just to have an indirected list. Now, we've talked about these before, but we don't really ever use them in my recollection in Handmade Hero, because doubly indirected lists just aren't that common in games. We probably will see some a little bit later when we're talking about things that are more like, maybe like this guy is like chasing some people and they're double, who knows. There's going to be some things presumably that happen, but we just have not really had much use for them, and they're a lot less common in things like games than they are in something like an editor where you're going to have more of that happening. But either way, they're extremely easy, right? All we have to do is introduce some secondary structure that instead will capture, right, the linkage part of things, and that linkage part will be separate from the variable itself, right? So now, whatever this thing actually is, right, we won't have to actually worry about how many people want to use it. They will always just sort of be able to keep creating these new debug variable references inside their hierarchies, and well, they'll just be able to they'll just be able to keep on referencing and referencing and referencing and referencing as much as they want. And because the rest of this stuff is all just what you would expect, then all we really have to do is change anyone who is actually going to be using one of these things, right, to actually point to a reference instead of an actual variable, right? So for example, here where we've got a group that's holding a bunch of things, what we want to do is instead of making that group actually hold debug variable chains, we just want it to hold reference chains, right? And similarly, when we have a debug variable hierarchy, excuse me, what we'd want to do there is have that hierarchy basically take some kind of a reference as well. Now, I don't know. When I'm kind of thinking about it here, I feel like probably the debug variable hierarchy thing should probably do something slightly different. So I want to hold off on modifying that. Because I think we might want to do something slightly different there. So for now, I'm just going to do the work necessary to port this over to having debug variable references be things that are kind of processed dynamically in that way, right? All right, so here we go. We've got our debug variable reference stuff. I should probably make this defined up there so it can refer to them. Here we go. And then in here, when we do debug add variable, what we want to do now is essentially just make both things here, because this is still used generally to create, sort of a referencing sort of a scheme. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a debug variable thing here, which is like debug add, unreferenced variable, in case we want to ever do that specifically. And that will do just the part of this that does not involve the grouping, right? So basically this part. And then what we'll do is we'll say, okay, we'll create the variable. There we go. And then we will also, excuse me, once we create the variable, we will also create a debug variable reference. So we'll do add variable reference, context, type. Well, we don't need type. All I think we really need is context. And probably the variable, right? And then in here, we'll just do debug variable reference. And the debug variable reference will just do this part, that we saw before, right? And this presumably will return a debug variable reference. Well, actually, I guess I don't know which one it would have to return. I think you'd probably want it to return the variable reference, because the variable reference can get to the variable, but the variable can't get to the reference, right? So we'll do it that way. All right. So in here, what we would need for our debug variable reference, we just need something that actually points to the debug variable. And there it is. And so when we create this debug variable reference, let's go ahead and put that in there. Again, really nothing particularly interesting going on here. Debug variable var. And so when, we're just going to do the exact same thing we did before. We're going to get another one of these guys, debug variable reference. We're going to push the debug variable reference onto the arena. We're going to go ahead and set the reference so that its variable points to the variable that we were given. And then all the rest of these things that we used to do group-wise, they're all going to be talking about the reference now instead of talking about the variable. But that's about it, right? Not a lot else going on there. So that's all we need to do there. Now on the parent front, again, I think the parent front wants to be doing references as well. So basically, like when you look at this thing, we want our trees, the trees we construct, I think always want to be references, so we can have arbitrary trees, and the variables underneath will just be specific things or whatever, right? And so if we have that, we need this to be a variable reference, like so. And this right here would need to be a variable reference, like so. And then as we move down, when we're talking about like the group here or whatever, we're actually going to talk about the group var, right? Because now the group is always sort of an indirected pointer there. And if we want to, I suppose we could also do it this way, where we just say, we've got context group. And if the group itself, we could also do something like this, group ref. In fact, I could do it like this, right? Ref parent, and then I could do something like, here's the group, and if the ref parent is not 0, oops. Then we'll go ahead and grab that ref parent variable out, right? So there we go. All right. In here, it thinks it cannot convert something to a variable reference. Now, why would that be? Oh, that's because I forgot a pointer there. That's no good. Oops. Let's try that again. Debug add variable cannot convert from variable reference. Okay, so that's fine. When we begin variable group, that'll just do this. Excuse me. That's all really simple. Nothing really to do there. When we return groups, right, this should return a reference as well. And debug add variable, same thing here. This is going to be reference. This is going to be var. This will actually be ref var. So these are all refs now. And I assume these are going to be something like this, right? Yeah. And again, all I'm really doing, nothing particularly unusual here, just really basic stuff. I'm just changing it so that these things are kind of doubly directed. And that just allows me to have the superstructure stored in something other than the data is stored in. And it's just a really, really basic transformation. It's a little bit of typing, but it doesn't really, nothing momentous is happening. It's really just pretty boring. Pretty milquetoast. Pretty milquetoast. And so, yeah, so that's about it. These guys obviously are returning references now, and so they kind of have to go through that var indirection. And again, this is debug code, so we don't care about the indirections either. We don't really care at all about this stuff. If its performance was bad, we just buy a faster dev machine. No users ever have to run it, so it only matters if it works and it's convenient for us to implement. And hopefully it will be both of those things, although sometimes you never do know. All right, let's keep going. So now we want to go ahead and propagate this change out one level up, which is to say that the root group structure that these people are working with, we really want to have a debug variable reference there. And so the hierarchy group, I guess I said I wasn't going to do it yet, but I guess I will actually do it because, hey, we might as well propagate it out, and then I'll fix it in a second. So then we have, when we're writing our stuff out, when we do our root groups now, we're going to want to look at vars here, right? Like so. And these are not vars, really, these are refs. And so we'll have debug variable var equals ref var. Then all of this stuff should work basically the same. The only difference now is at the end, when we do stuff, yeah, we're going to set the ref, not the var, right? So we're really just working off of refs here because we're iterating over the refs, and the vars are just this kind of like thing that we're looking into underneath, if that makes sense. Okay. Yeah, and so we're going to have to do, like I said, we're going to have to do another round of lofting in a second, but that's okay. So let's just go ahead and finish this up. So in here, again, we've got that hierarchy group thing, so that's going to have to access inside. What are you complaining about, Mr.? Oh, right. There we go. And let's see, debug say hot equals var, so this is actually, like I said again, ref, and then we have a debug variable var, which is going to be the ref var. And then we just have to fix our iterators. Like I said before, we're iterating on ref now, so this stuff just works like this, right? Okay. So I think that's it. And in theory, this should still work relatively similarly to the way it does before, modulo any errors that we may have made, but it looks like it's pretty good, right? We're still able to iterate over our things, and all that stuff is fine, right? So that all seems pretty good. So let's go ahead and check now. Now that we have those variable references, let's see if we can do something where we take, a particular debug variable and we add it into two different groups, right? Just to test that ability to make sure that we've actually done it right. So now, let's say we've got something that we have here, like debug camera distance. I want to go ahead and add that outside. So I'm going to say that I have a debug variable reference here. That's the debug cam, use debug cam ref or something like that. That use debug cam ref, when I do my debug variable listing, I'm going to grab it. I don't know if I can actually do that with the macro. I think I can. Yeah, I can. And so when I come out here, what I want to do is I want to go ahead and add a variable at the very end that's going to shadow that variable. They're going to be the same variable, right? So what I would do there is I'd say use debug cam ref. I want to add, like if you, oops, let me do that. Handmade debug variables. I want to go ahead and add that guy in. So what I want to do here is just debug add variable reference, like so. And debug add variable reference will take the context, and then I can add this variable again. So I'm just going to take that variable that I added before, and I'm going to add it again, right there, right? Oops, and I've got to get rid of that errant ADD that's there. So now when I run, if I open this up, you can see that I've got use debug camera here, which didn't used to be here. And it's the same use debug camera that's right here. And in fact, you can even see that when I mouse over them now, they both highlight because they're the same variable, and I'm testing for highlighting, I'm testing variableness. And when I change them, they both change, and I can change them in either place, right? And again, that's all I really wanted to do there. I wanted to make it so there was no penalty for having things in more than one place, because I may want to have things in more than one place, and now I do, right? So that's good. Okay. All right. So now, we're going to need some more memory. So one of the things that we do here is we take like all the memory that we are allowed to use for our debug system, which means that if I wanted to make more stuff, I wouldn't be able to do so, right? There'd be no way for me to actually make a new menu if I was going to tear one off. There would be no way to actually do that, which is kind of, which is a little bit, that's bad. It's a little bit poop sauce, right? And so you can see where that's actually happening, right? We have the debug start thing. And up here, you can see me initialize this arena like this. You can see me sort of like getting the size of that debug arena. And then when I come down through here, we do like allocate render group. We do all these sorts of things. When we do the restart collation, if I'm not very much in error, we then go ahead and take that collation arena Yeah, that's the thing that we actually use to do all of our debug scratch work. And so let's take a look at that. So when we do that sub-arena, oh, I'm a liar. We don't use all the memory. Okay, so we still did leave some memory for use in stuff like this, so that's good. All right, so when we want to, we should be able to just go ahead and make more of these anytime we want, and that's pretty sweet. I like that. That makes me happy camper. So if I want to do all of this stuff, all I really need to do now is make some way for me to have more, more than one of these debug variable hierarchies, right? Because the debug variable hierarchy is the thing that controls what is drawn, and right now I can only have one of them. When we call draw debug menu, you can see that I can only draw one debug hierarchy. It's like hard-coded to be that one. So what I'd rather do is make it so that I can draw like as many debug hierarchies as I want, right? I'd rather have something that's just a for loop here that just draws debug hierarchies, like, and just keeps drawing them and drawing them and drawing them and drawing them. You know what I'm saying? Something like that. And this debug state at y thing, that's a bit of a janky thing as well, because that's just, it means it'll append. We need like more of a concept of where that stuff's going to go. We have those sort of things that are just like the little command line compiling thing and that kind of stuff. We need a better sense of where those goes, because these are now these floating menu things, and there's no real sense of like where things would get appended. So there's a bunch of things we need to do for that. And so just ignore that for now. Forget about that stuff. We don't care about that at all. We're going to come back around to it and just pluck it out. Just give it a little pluck. With some zircon encrusted tweezers, we're just going to reach in there and just grab it. All right. So what we need to do here, we need to loop over some of these things. So I want something like, hierarchy equals, debug state first hierarchy or something ridiculous like that. I don't even know. Like this. Or maybe there's a hierarchy sentinel. I don't even know. Hierarchy sentinel or something like this. And I just want to go until hierarchy sentinel, like next or something like that. Yeah, so there's, debug variable hierarchy next or previous, something like that. And so when the hierarchy is not equal to the sentinel anymore, I'm just going to loop through it. And that would allow me to just have like some arbitrary number of those. And then when we actually talk about the hierarchy itself, we would actually just grab whatever hierarchy we want, and that means we can have as many of those things, floating around as we want to have floating around. They can just float, float, and float, and float all day long, and no one will care. You know what I'm saying to you? Getting to be allergy season, man. There's going to be some stuffy noses, so buckle up. All right. So here's that list, iteration that I want to have happen. So all I have to do if I want that list iteration to happen is I have to actually just go implement it. So now our hierarchy is actually going to become the hierarchy sentinel, like this. And when I recompile, everything will break, and then I can fix it because I'm just gonna do some fixing of it. Never mind. So when I go ahead and add the add hierarchy function here, which is the function we're going to want to add our root group. So we just want to do something that's going to like put the hierarchy we already had in as the only hierarchy, right? So we're going to want something called add hierarchy that's going to do that for us because that's pretty obvious. And we just tell it where we want it to go, and then we'd tell it like what the root group was. Presumably it would return to us what the hierarchy was. That's it. Nothing fancy. And then let's see what else it would complain about. Yeah, I know you don't have add hierarchy. So in here, cannot convert. Okay, so I don't need to take an address there. I don't know why I thought I did. That was just kind of stupid. All right, and so this is just going to be pointers because it wasn't a pointer before. Now it is pointers. And yeah, I think that's it. So as long as we have a function called add hierarchy, that would give us what we want. Nothing particularly weird about that. It's just, you've seen me do it a million times. Again, this is the thing about not having metaprogramming. I hate templates and I refuse to use them, so I am happy to like code my own linked lists by hand when I need them. Normally at work, I just metacode them. But if I don't have them, I just type them in. because I find that like actually works, and trying to use templates never does. It's always a disaster, and then you just have the ISO C++ committee squatting on you the whole time, and it's awful. So anyway, let's go ahead and get a debug variable reference in here. Debug variable reference. And the P, the location where it's going to be. So if that's what I want, I just need to get one of these, so I can push struct into the debug arena pretty easily, right? So I can make a new one of these where I just say like, okay, here's my debug variable hierarchy, my new one, right? Like so. And when I grab this hierarchy out, debug variable hierarchy, I just need to initialize the stuff that's in it. So the UIP is going to be @p. The group is going to be the root group. Or I shouldn't even say root group anymore, because this is just group. It happens to be the root group the first time we call it, but that's it. The next and the previous are just going to be, again, standard W-link list here. It takes 10 seconds to implement, right? You've got the hierarchy sentinel, like so. So the previous pointer, we're going to insert this at the head end. So the previous guy is going to be the sentinel itself. Whoever the sentinel's next pointer was is going to be our next pointer. And then we just need to fix up the other pointers, right? So at that point, we know that whoever is next, whoever is the person that comes after us, their previous pointer should point to us. And whoever came before us, their next pointer should point to us, right? And that's about all there is to it. So then we finally probably want to make sure that we actually return this so that anyone who's trying to do something with it after it's been added, excuse me, had barbecue for lunch, man. It was crazy. It was too much food. All right, so let's see here. We go ahead and we do our push struct. That seems like it's all corrupt. That should be an address probably, huh? Let's see. Do not have an overloaded operator. That is correct. It does not have an overloaded operator. I agree with you. And that should be a pointer. Okay. So that adds something, our sentinel, to the list there. And I don't remember if I wrote the loop code there. I don't think that I did. So that's probably a little bit of an issue. I also don't know if I have to clear out those pointers to point to each other at the outset. And so I just have to make sure that all that stuff is kosher at startup, and then I think we should be fine. So when we create our context here it is, right? When we get our debug state, I can just make that hierarchy. Let's see where it is. So we've got the next equals the hierarchy itself. Again, I'm just standard W-link list, making the list start out, pointing the sentinel point to itself, so it's an empty list. And I'm also going to go ahead and make that group pointer point to 0, just to make sure that everyone knows that if you tried to iterate over it, you would be very unhappy and things would go horribly wrong for you. So don't do that. And let's see. So I think that's the only thing I had left to implement on the linked list, but I can't quite remember. Let's see. Looks like we are drawing that multiple times. That, if I'm not mistaken. So I feel like we are not exiting out of our loop quite right. Let me double check that. My for loop, there it is, right? Okay, so in the debug hierarchy, we go through the next one. We loop over it until we are done with that. And let me check my hierarchy add hierarchy. That looks correct, and the previous points back to the hierarchy sentinel itself. That all looks good. And the hierarchy, the next previous points back to me, and the previous next points back to me. Okay, so that's good. But it does look like we're drawing it multiple times, so I'm going to go ahead and step in there to the draw main menu. Or what is it? Debug draw main menu. Debug. Where is that draw main menu thing? There it is. Draw debug menu. That's what it's called. Somehow we, you know what? You know what the fudge, man? What the fudge? All right. Debug draw menu. Name's at least a little bit more consistent. Okay. So I'm going to step into debug draw menu there. Actually, I'm going to do add hierarchy. Okay. And so let's just make sure everything is kosher here. And yeah, actually wanted to look at that Sentinel, Hierarchy Sentinel. Next, there is my next guy. So here's me, which is null, and here's my next guy, and then the next one points back to the Sentinel. So that's good. That's exactly what I wanted. So that all looks nice. And then let's go ahead and continue on, or try to continue on. Where is my draw debug menu? Oops, that's Handmade. So that's not actually where I want. I don't want to be in Handmade LCPP. I want to be in Handmade debug. There we go. And so here I should have my draw menu function, and of course there it is, debug draw menu. And so if I come through here, I should be drawing the hierarchy. There we go. So that's good. And there's our debug variable group as well. So I come through here, and this thing does all of its drawing fun, and that's all good. And then it should just kind of bust out of there. And then when I come through here, well, I exited out. So that seems totally correct, actually. And I'm not really sure what the problem is. You know what the problem is? I bet add hierarchy. I bet I'm calling that in the, yeah. Nice. That's pretty stupid. You gotta admit, it's pretty stupid. I was calling that once a frame. That's gonna be a lot of hierarchies and a lot of drawing. So let's not do that. Question though, how will we know where to put this hierarchy when we do not actually know how big things are? I guess we probably do actually know how big they are, because we could calculate this stuff ahead of time, I suppose, right? Like we would know what these things are, I suppose. So if we want to, we can probably do that stuff, right? So we could probably start out putting it at like that, and we could start out with this guy being, at 0.5 times height. Okay. So now I think we're in better shape, right? Everything seems pretty good there. Everything is happy and smiling. And so let's go ahead and make it so that we can tear things off of here, which again is something that I said I wanted to do. So if I want to be able to tear things off of here, what I'm going to do for that is we had that sort of interaction concept here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new interaction concept. And that interaction concept is going to allow you to tear groups off and put them in other places. So, okay, if I was going to do that, what I'd like to do is go ahead and introduce some kind of a little thing here into my interactions type. And so what I'm going to do is, I guess I've got this tear value thing, right? And so I feel like probably the easiest thing to do would just be to put a little thing that I could tear, that I could use to tear stuff off of. We'll try that first, we'll see. But what I'm going to do before anything else is I'm going to make it so that the toggle value thing, I'm just going to make it so it always tears, and then we'll have a way to do the tearing separately. So I'm going to go into toggle value here and say when we do debug begin, you know what? Why don't I just do it? Just like stop like blabbering about it and just go just to do it. It would take you longer to do it than it would to like say all this stuff. So anyway, when I do the push rect, you saw me before do this where I put a size box in here, right? And so what I could do instead, like with the other stuff, is I could go ahead and make it so that everything has like a little tear off thingy, like thing. And so I'm just going to do that because why not, right? And so to do that, I would just do the exact same thing I did here, right? I just do this. Oops. You know what I'm saying? Where I basically just have like, okay, so there's a tear box or something like this. And the tear box would just be something that we put that allows you to like grab the thing and like put it somewhere else, you know? Or something like that, right? And you could even do something fancier than that if you wanted to. You could make it that like if you had a modifier key held down or something like that. I don't know. But for right now, I'm just going to do it this way. Or you know what? No. I'm not going to do it that way. Let's just do it this way. Let's say we have debug interaction none. But if we are in some situation where we actually do have some kind of extra input thing happening, some kind of, something else happening, then we will do the tear, right? Something like this, like, B32 alt UI, right? And so in here, there's like some kind of alt UI thing where we just say like, okay, if you had whatever the alt UI thing is down, then it's going to be a tear operation. Otherwise, it's going to be a none operation, right? Something like that. Does that seem fair? And maybe these guys work the same way as well. I don't know. Maybe we'll formalize that later. I'm not sure. But something like this. And then when we, isn't that a thing? Tear value. Okay. And then, in here, what we'll do is we'll just say, I don't know, like, whatever is supposed to be happening is happening if you have the something alt key down. Do the modifiers, do we have modifiers on here? I don't even remember. Mouse buttons. So we don't seem to have any modifiers, but we could actually add those pretty easily, right? We could add a modifier key in there pretty trivially. For right now, what I'll do is I'll just say like, okay, the mouse P, the alt UI thing, maybe the alt UI, and you know what, I could even do that. That doesn't even have to happen in here now that I think about it. I could do that in a totally different way. I could do that where we just have, where we had the less mouse button thing, and this thing doesn't even have to know about it. What I could do is I could say, all right, when we do the interaction begin stuff, right, debug begin interaction in here, what I could do is say, like, if we were about to do an interaction with the right mouse button, then let's do something a little bit different. You know what I'm saying? Something like that. Or if the right mouse button was down at the time or something like that. And then we'll later make that be an alt key thing. So we could do something like, input like alt UI here. I could do this. So if the right mouse button's down, we're in alt UI mode, or I guess I should say ended down. There we go. So if the right mouse button is down at the time, then we're in alt UI mode, and we'll just go ahead and make the begin interact up here. Debug begin interact. We'll have alt UI here, like so. And then what we'll do there is we'll just say, like, if there was a hot thing, right? Then if there's a hot interaction, we'll do it. If there's not a hot interaction, what we'll do instead here is we'll say, well, if the alt UI is happening, we always want to tear the value, right? So if the alt UI is happening, then we're just going to force the value to be a tear. Otherwise, we won't. Something like that. And I guess now that I think about it, this could happen up here as well. Let's see. There we go. So that's all good, but we didn't actually ever implement tear value, so now I actually do have to implement tear value. You know what I'm saying? And so we've got drag value, right? And we implemented that, but we never implemented tear value. So let's go ahead and do that. Here's tear value, like so. And when we want to do a tear value, all we want to do for tear value is we just want to create, right, another, some other sort of, some other one of these add hierarchy things, right? And then we just want that to sort of persist. So we want to do something like, we have a debug variable hierarchy, right? Which is like the, the dragging hierarchy, this sort of thing. You know what I'm saying? And that is just a variable that we would set here, where we'd say like, okay, you know, if you had not actually done that yet, if you had not created the debug state dragging hierarchy, then go ahead and create that. Dragging hierarchy equals add hierarchy, interacting with whatever the thing is that we're interacting with. That's the variable that we want there, right? Trying to think if we also need a new group to hold this variable. I think we do. So what we actually want to do too here is we want to add a group, a new group. I'm going to hold off on that for 1 second, just one little second, right? And then what we're going to do is we're just going to say like wherever the mouse is, like wherever it is, the debug state dragging hierarchy UIP is going to be equal to that location, right? And then debug hierarchy, whenever we end our interaction, like when we're clearing out our state, we'll just clear out that state and we'll be done. You know? Okay. So if we do an add hierarchy here, what we need to know at this point, like I said, is we need to have some way of adding a group, because you can see that this is supposed to take a debug variable reference, and at the moment we aren't giving it that. And I'm pretty sure it needs a reference to an actual group as well. So what we want to do here is have some way of adding a debug variable group directly, right? A reference to a group. So we want a thing that's like, you know, like our debug begin variable group thing, right? We want to be able to do that, but we want to be able to do that outside of having a context, right? So we want to be able to do something that does like debug add root group, something like that, which just takes the debug the debug state by itself and can go from there. So it can add the group. It'll set its expansion. I guess in this case it'd be expanded, would be set to true if it's the root group. It'll initialize its children stuff to not have anything in it or anything like that. And it'll set, it'll set us up to actually use that thing as a root group. Now, we need a context to do debug add variable, but what I'm going to do here is just, and I'm just thinking this through. If we always have a group for every one of these floaty things, then really these don't need to be referenced variables, do they? So really they'd be these things, if that makes sense. So really what we're looking at is something more like this, right? Or you might even say debug state, debug arena. You know what I'm saying? And then these guys, when they actually call debug add unreferenced variable, it would just, call it like that or whatever. This is what we actually, I think, probably want, because there's no reason to create a variable reference for that as far as I can think of. So when we do add root group, what we'd actually be doing is adding an unreferenced variable, right? And we do it would look like this, right? So we do debug add unreferenced variable. We pass the state. And it would be nice if we could get these two things to play together. And I think that we can, right? Probably what we would do is we just do this, where we say like, okay, add a root group or something like that, like this, add a root group, and then add the reference for the root group immediately thereafter. You know what I'm saying? So it would be like this sort of thing. Where we just do that. And then we could set it so that these guys don't expand by default or something like that, right? That seems That seems pretty sane to me. I don't know how you guys feel about it, but that seems reasonable, right? Or at least somewhat reasonable. Okay. So I'm going to just make this go away for a second. So, and then I'm going to double check that that worked to add the stuff normally. It does. Okay. So now to finish our tearing implementation, what we do here is say, okay, when we're dragging these things, what I want to be able to do is I want to be able to add a root group here, like so. And then, oops, that's not right. What I want to be able to do is add a root group here. Debug add root group. And then what I want to do is I want to add that variable to the group, right? I want to add a reference of the variable to that particular group. And again, that's going to force me to kind of make this be a two-level thing that's not going to use the context anymore, but that's okay, right? Totally fine with that. So if we do debug add root group here, this will give me back a debug variable that's my root group. The root group itself will be the thing that the hierarchy sees, like that. And again, that'll just take the debug state. And the root group will just take a name. And I guess it doesn't really need a name, because since it's never displayed, it's just going to be like a user group, I guess, or something like that. I don't know. It'd never actually show that name, I don't think. I don't actually know. We'll have to verify that that's true. But yes, I'm pretty sure that's true. And so now all I really have to do is just go through here and presumably make it so that that add hierarchy actually makes sure that that takes a debug variable for the group. And the hierarchies themselves are always taking debug variables, right? So something like this. Okay. So the context group, in this case, will just grab the variable out. Same thing here. So in this case, we don't have to dereference it by var, and so we're just doing this. And now this should work, I think, properly. And you can kind of see there that it does, right? And so now I just need to make it so that we can tear the values off. We've already implemented the code for it, essentially. But what we have not done is made it so that it actually adds anything. Now for end interaction, I guess the tear value doesn't actually need to do anything, I don't think. I'm pretty sure it only needs to do it here. And so what we really need now is just a way of taking whatever the thing was that you were interacting with and adding it to that group. So we want to do something like, you know, like add variable to group, or debug add reference, I guess would be the thing. So inside the variables thing, where we have the add variable reference, debug add variable reference, what we want to do is make it so that context thing isn't actually required anymore. So when you add a variable reference, what we'd say is like, okay, then you're going to need the debug state because we need to be able to allocate it. You're going to need the variable, but then now we'll just say, okay, say there's a group, so you pass it the group and the variable, and it just does that. It just adds it to that group, right? And so if I wanted to do that, all I would do is say the debug arena is the arena you're coming from, so you know that's fine. We have the debug variable reference, we allocate that, we do all the stuff that we need to do here. But now, instead of getting that group out of the context, instead we get it like this, right? And I don't think we need anything else there. Well, I lied. That's very sad. Since people use their parents as a reference, although in this case, do they even need to do that? They don't. So I guess they don't need a parent. So I guess that's actually all fine too. Yeah. No. I mean, since you want to have the references, so I guess I do, you know, I was hoping I'd get away without it, but it doesn't look like it. It doesn't look like it. It looks like this is going to have to be that way. So that's the way it has to go. Fine by me. Don't really care one way or the other. So anyway, moving on. We do the exact same thing we were doing here. Everything's the same. The only difference is we don't sort of loft it out of the context. We just get it directly. So it's the exact same function. And so all this is going to do now is just do, you know, it's just literally going to do a pass-through, right? So when you're calling it from the sort of builder context like we were using before, where you're constructing these lists, you would call it this way. And here, what it does is it says like, okay, when I'm going to pass this in, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab that group out of the context like this, and then it's going to call the exact same code that anyone else could call when they don't have a context, right? So this way, again, turning the context just into like a helper for that code below, and so that you don't ever actually need one. So if we do it that way, we should be able to now call debug add variable reference directly. This, unfortunately, again, I'm going to have to say that we do have to do it the way that I was going to do it before. I didn't really want to do it that way, but turns out we have to, because the fact that our tree uses that as its parent pointer kind of means there's really no way of getting around it. But then we just say, okay, whatever the thing was we were interacting with, now we're going to tear it off, right? And so we're going to add that in, and we're going to go from there. We're going to make that be our hierarchy, and that's pretty much all we would need to do. But that just means that I have to make it so that we can do, excuse me, the thing we were going to do before. So let me just go ahead and make that work. There we go. Debug add variable. None of the overloads convert all the argument types. Debug add variable reference. Context state. There we go. And then debug add root group. Like I said before, debug add root group. Just now does have to be a thing that actually adds a variable reference, which is not particularly tough. It just means that now the debug variable reference, it will have to actually call to make one of those. Before I was thinking that we would not actually have to make one of those, but it turns out that we do. So when we add the root group here, in fact, really it's sort of almost the exact same as this thing too. It just means that when we add the root group, we're going to have to do something like this, where we add the variable reference. We're going to pass a 0 here because it's the root group, and then we'd pass the var here like this, and then we'd pass that state, right? So I think all of that stuff is going to be basically the same. I don't think there would be anything else that we'd have to do with it. But again, it does mean that when we call debug add root group here, we wouldn't be able to do that. So what we do is we'd say debug variable reference, right? This would be debug variable there. And this would be like debug add root group, debug state, carousel name, right? Let's go ahead and return that. Okay. So now this is basically our debug add root group internal, right? Like nobody else is going to ever call that. It's just a utility. And now we have two ways that's called, right? We have one way that calls it here, right? You can see that, and I guess I could do it this way. It'll be easier to read. So you have one way that calls it there. That's the guy who actually has to add it using the context. And it's a little bit tortured. I would unwind this if we weren't on stream. It's not so, there's just some fussing I could do to make that a little bit on the line, but I want to finish this up, and we only have about 5 minutes left, so I'm not going to do it right now. Or ever, potentially. But anyway, so we go ahead and do debug add root group internal. We can call that now from here as well. Here's debug add root group internal being called a second time. When I call that here, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add a reference as well, but I'm not going to use the context call, right? So instead, what I'm going to do is call debug add variable reference with the one that takes the state and the group to add to, which is nobody in this case. So that'll add that variable reference and allow me to return the group ref like so. So that's really all I need to do there, I think. And then I'll just fix up whatever else there is. There we go. That's that. Yeah. And now add hierarchy goes back to the way that it was before. Again, nothing particularly special there. And I just have to fix the compile errors that introduced, which is that the debug root group is now back to exactly, and this is just basically reverting that change, right? That's all I'm doing here. Nothing else. And that's about it for that. Okay. So let's take a look what happens here. I don't know where we're at. When I hold down the right mouse button, I think that was the cue for doing the tear off. So let's see what happens. Let's see. Oops, that's supposed to be a not. Dragging hierarchy. So off we go. Let's see what happens. So if I drag this, now I've got another group out there. Perfect. Yeah, there we go. And so you can see kind of what happens here. I can now have multiple ones of these. And the only problem that we have now is, things like the expansion state of these guys is mirrored because they're going to be in the same, sort of situation, right? Now I could, so it's pretty easy if I build a new group out here, I can put these guys, I can leave them out here, and those all work pretty nicely. But yeah, again, what I might want to do is have it so that the expand and collapse state for groups is going to be something that actually gets it gets its own state for that. And there's multiple ways that we could do that. There's actually 2 different ways to do that. What I'd like to do, instead of focusing on that at all at the moment, is I'd like to do one more thing first, and then we could maybe talk about that next week since we don't have a whole lot of time here. I'd like to be able to move these guys around. I'd like to be able to move, once I put them somewhere, I'd like to be able to do something other than pulling them off like I am at the moment, I'd like to be able to sort of move them once they've been pushed. And so what I'm going to do there too is just, again, introduce a little UI element, something pretty simple, which is something, that's going to be, I don't know, something like this, which is going to be, move hierarchy or something like that. Something like this. And that would just do something where it would go like, okay, if you're going to move a hierarchy, it will take whatever the dragging hierarchy UIP is, and it will do the sort of same thing that it was doing with the mouse stuff, right? So I'd like to have a way to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and add that, move hierarchy. And the only problem with that is we don't currently have any way of actually making that do anything, right? We don't have a way of getting, saying that we want that to be what happens. But I should be able to do something relatively quickly that allows us to make it so that you can do that. Excuse me. I'm not sure what the easiest way would be. But one way might be I could take, one of these sorts of things here, right? And when I first draw the hierarchy, maybe what I do is I do some kind of a thing where I create a box, which is like the movement box for the thing, or something like this. And I say that that's going to be whatever the UIP of this thing is, There's like a little kind of, there's a little hot guy there. And maybe we'll do him at the end so he always has primacy as well, So we'll do that, we'll render the thing, do a push rect, we'll call this the move box, we'll do some kind of, we'll do some kind of a test on it, like if, well, you know what, I don't really care about this at the moment. I'm going to leave this as just a thing. There we go, because we don't have very much time left. And so now what I want to do is when I drag one of these out, right, I get a little box there. I guess there's a little box in the corner. And what I might do is I might move it back a little bit from the UIP, right? I might move it like, so that it's off a little bit from the UIP. And so if we are inside that rectangle, then what I'm going to say is, we've got something like if it's inside the rectangle, whatever the move box is, excuse me, then what I'm going to do is say the next hot interaction, right, is going to be to move the hierarchy, and the next hot thing where we do this, next hot hierarchy or whatever, is going to be me, right? And you'll notice the next hot hierarchy thing, this is kind of going to motivate the next change that I would want to do here, and I kind of alluded to it on the previous stream, how these things start to proliferate. I'll sort of probably want to start out Monday by doing this one, but we're going to leave it that way for now. So if we do that, that's what we'll do. It's all good, and then in here we'll have a thing where we're like, okay, debug hierarchy, next hot hierarchy, that. So then what I want to do, and you know, thinking about it too, I feel like we probably could avoid that if we want to by just having having hierarchies themselves be debug variables. That probably would have been a smarter thing to do. That's very tempting. That's very, very tempting, actually. That would have been really smart. I'm going to say that's a to-do. Hierarchies should be debug variables. So I'm gonna say that that should happen. But anyway, for a moment, I'll just implement it in this kind of very sloppy fashion. And what I will do is say, okay, the next hot hierarchy is going to be that thing. And so then what I'll say is, you know, when we do this thing, when we do the next hot thing there, right? When we do debug state, hot interaction, that stuff, I'm going to say that dragging hierarchy equals next hot hierarchy. That's it. Okay. So yeah. There's a couple ways we could do that actually, now that I think about it, that are pretty easy too. So we'll see. So yeah, so let's see if we can make this work at all. So I should also do a thing where we can see whether we're inside that, so we know whether we're actually able to drag it or not. Let me see what happens with next hot hierarchy here. When I do dragging hierarchy, debug begin interact, hot interaction, interaction equals hot interaction, dragging hierarchy equals 0 at the end of end interact. Okay, so move box. If is inside rectangle, move box, debug state next hot interaction equals move hierarchy, next hot hierarchy equals hierarchy. I feel like that should have worked, but it did not work. Why not? Why did it not work? Someone needs to tell me why it didn't work. And I'm not sure. Yeah. All right, well, let's debug it. Grab that guy. Yeah, so it never even gets in there. Next hot hierarchy. Debug state. Next hot hierarchy. Let's see. Oh, next hot hierarchy also I wouldn't have been clearing it, although that doesn't actually matter. Next hot. There we go. That doesn't really actually matter at all. And in fact, technically, next hot and next hot hierarchy, it's really just debug interaction none is the only thing that actually ever has to be cleared, but I just like to do that so that I can see it, right? So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to say that, like, okay, when we do this stuff, I'm going to do debug text line hierarchy. I'm going to do that if the debug state next hot hierarchy was non-zero. Right, so when we do debug interact and we come through the debug draw menu thing, at the end of it, I'm just going to say let's add a text line if it thought we were interacting with the hierarchy at that time. Right, so there we go. So it does think we're interacting with it, but for some reason we never set the thing right. So I'm going to go ahead and set a breakpoint at begin interact just to see what happens. Yeah, so it's never allowed to actually push the left mouse button for reasons unknown. Oops. So let's see. Oh, it's just because it requires hot. That's dumb. Hot interaction is supposed to be the thing that we check. So that's just dumb because that never should have been that way. Right? It's only ever supposed to look like this. It's only supposed to say, like, okay, if there's a hot interaction, we always set the hot interaction. If there isn't a hot interaction, then we would actually go into this situation, right? Because if there's a hot interaction, you always do it. You just assume that the person knew what they were doing, which may be a bad assumption, but you assume it anyway, right? Yeah, that's how that should actually work. And then if they don't click on anything, right? If there was nothing that was hot, in fact, this thing should be in here as well. If there's nothing that was hot, then we just have this else case, which is to do the no op. All right. So let's try that again. That was just an oversight in the way I originally wrote that code. That was not what I had ever intended. That's just how it ended up in the series of steps we did to make it. So now we're all good here. Looks like pretty good. This stuff all still works, it looks like, so that's good. And now we can do our tearing off, which I wanted to do. So there, we teared that off. And in theory, there we go. Now we can drag as well. Although, looks like debug end interact assumes we're always interacting with something, which is not what I ever actually wanted that to do. And in fact, should no longer be an assertion, because that's not something that I even care about. That looks like just some sort of vestigial remain. So that's fine. All right. So maybe that should go here, because toggle value obviously should always have one, but all right. All right. Yay. So that's pretty nice. We're slowly but surely getting there. Building a reasonable UI system. It takes a few hours, but a few hours is not very long. And we're starting to get to the point where most of the fundamental things are there. And we just would want to polish them maybe a little, you know, so that they're not quite so ugly or janky. But at this point, you know, you can do some pretty crazy stuff, and it all kind of works, which is nice. So I'll go ahead and go to a brief Q&A now, now that we've got all that working. And we'll see what's going down. So if you have any questions about what we did, we will answer them now. If you could please put Q: in front of it, that would be pretty sweet, so that I could see them. Oh dear. I should also probably get rid of that little debug printout. Connor Rent says, no questions. Well, if you don't have any questions, then that's it. You'd just be like, all right, we're done. Nothing to see here. Elvin, you mentioned that encapsulation is good but not in the OOP way. Could you elaborate then in which way you mean? I just mean that it's fine to cav off sections of your project and say that they are, you know, not supposed to be used by the outside world, right? Meaning once you're certain that something is like totally set the way it should go, you know, if you want to go ahead and move that out of like, you know, the public interface for that thing, then that's fine, you know? And I'll do that sometimes just mentally where I'm like, okay, you know, I'll put a bunch of stuff in an H file and these are the functions you should call to use this system. And I'll take a bunch of the structs and a bunch of the functions out of the H file and just put them in the CPP. So it's kind of clear, like, these are the things you should call and you shouldn't worry about anything else, right? Because this, you know, sort of library thing or whatever it is that I made doesn't, you know, there are certain things that I want you to focus on, certain things that you don't. And that's fine. If that makes sense. Insofar as, are the menu items spaced evenly vertically? It looks a bit odd to me. No, they're not at the moment. The reason for that is because we don't actually use the font spacing. What we use is the rectangle spacing, which means that if something has no descenders, it takes up less size. And we can change that if you want to. It's pretty simple, right? Basically, all that's doing is in here where we do this thing where we do like the first child whatever debug text size thing. What we would do instead is when we do debug get text size, what we do is we'd force the bounds to actually be different. So what we do is say, in fact, I guess what we do here is say that the bounds of the text size should be made to ensure that they are exactly the line size, right? So whatever the line size is, get line advance for this thing, right? So what we'd want to do there, and I think that's supposed to be multiplied by the font scale, right? Font scale times, yeah. So line advance for line advance. Yeah. So basically, that's what the line advance should be. So what we'd want to do there is just say, like, okay, in the case that we're drawing a text element, if you want to make sure they're all spaced evenly, instead of using the actual bounds here, you just say, well, instead of that, let's actually just use whatever the whatever the line advance is, right? So what we'd say is the bounds min should equal the bounds max minus the line advance. You know what I'm saying? And I suppose that's the bound min y, right? And that would just be if you wanted to force them all to be always the same size. And now you can kind of see that happening there, right? Hopefully that didn't disconnect me. I don't think it did. So yeah, so now these should be more reasonable sizes. At least I think so. Let me double check that I did that right. Bounds. Get dim bounds. Yeah. And I think, you know, what you do is you get rid of the spacing y thing as well. That would just be baked in there. And we'd probably say that whatever, when this thing did its thing, well, no, you'd probably put the spacing in there. You would probably put the spacing in there, so that there's some room in between them. Maybe you would, maybe you wouldn't. I don't know. It's hard to say. It's hard to say. You know, the other way to do it is you'd put it in here. So you'd say something like bounds dot min y minus equals spacing y. So things that aren't text, they get spaced. They get that spacing since they don't have a font line advance telling them how they should be spaced. I feel like that would maybe make that work. You know what I mean? But yeah, so I think that's roughly what we would want to do. So that makes sure that the bounds min y, max y, yeah, and so really also I suppose the other thing you have to do is this stuff, we really, if you want it all to be that way, after we get the text size, we would want to center, we would want to just use the min and max, basically, right? So we'd really do this. We'd really do rectangle text bounds like that. And then we do rectangle bounds equals some, you know, something like this. We'd say rectangle min max, and we'd say we want it to be here, right? We'd want it to do minus whatever the baseline thing was, right? That's where we would want it to, or I guess, yeah, I guess we'd want to do the left side, we'd want to do the bottom, which would just be the total, you know, however much the line advance was. That's where the bottom is, right? And the top is the top. And the right is just going to be the left px plus whatever the width of the original one was, right? Whatever the text bounds were. In fact, this one you could kind of do like, okay, the text bounds min x, whatever that left px is, it's just going to be the left px plus the min, right? And the left px plus the max. So that constructs the actual box that is not sensitive to where the text to what the text actual size is. That just ignores the fact that different texts are different sizes because they may or may not have descenders or ascenders, right? I think that would actually be what you would want to do, right? And I don't remember exactly what this is. Maybe rect min max. Yeah. So that's, I think, what you would want to do if you want to eliminate any variability in the spacing and just space things directly. Oops. Left px, top py. What did I do wrong there? Left px plus text bounds min x and text bounds max dot x. I feel like that should have been right. Top py minus line advance and top py. What happened bad there? Oh. Gotta love that variable shadowing. There we go. So that uses the actual line advance, and so that should always be the same now. And it does look like it is. So that's probably fine. I don't know if that's what you wanted, but that's how you would do that. Yeah. Why is there so much lag latency when dragging the hierarchies around, or is that just Twitch streaming artifacts? Well, let me see. Yeah, on my machine it's pretty much instantaneous. The lag, there is one bit of lag, and that just happens whenever the debug system resets, right? Because we've never finished doing that part of the process where the debug collation thing happens, remember? So debug collation is still expensive there, because we've never made it cheap. If you turned debug collation off, you would never have any hiccups. You can see there's no lag at all, and then when it does the debug collation, you get that hiccup, right? And that's not a hiccup in the debug system or in the game RAM. That's literally just the collator, and so if you just turned off collator, that wouldn't be there. That is something we should probably fix eventually, because it actually, we don't really care about that hiccup necessarily, but we do care about the fact that it wipes the debug state every time. And so it would be nice to have something that just does an incremental rolling buffer, so that so it doesn't have to ever do that wipe, right? That'd just be better. Are the different tear-offs intended to have identical hierarchies, or is the intention that you drill down into different things without all the tear-offs being affected? So I think what we want to do is make it so that you can expand ones differently, and also you can add ones. Like, it'd be nice to make it so you could just, when you're doing a tear-off, you can have ones that like add. So, you know, if I have this, I can then go ahead and like add just one thing to it, or maybe, like, you know, a better example would be like if I have just that, and now I want to add debug camera to it. You know, I take debug camera. I want to be able to make it so that it comes in here and it could be dropped into that group. So I can make my own groups, right? Which would be really pretty easy to do. And so that's just one thing I would like. I noticed you use the internal keyword. I haven't seen it before. What is this purpose? It's just pound defined to static. The Geek Pirate, I apologize since I came in late, but out of curiosity, what was the tolerance in pixels you used for dragging out a subsection? We did not do that. Ours right now just use the right mouse button to do it. You mentioned that for linked lists at work, you use metaprogram. What do you mean? I mean, we have a thing that generates stuff, superstructural stuff. So like things like linked lists, it just makes for you. Outcasted Bird. I missed 90% of the stream, so I missed a ton. I just want to ask, what are some tips for people who want to get into designing games? Do's and don'ts and simple things that are worthwhile. My only real tip is to try a different stream, because this is a programming stream. There is no design here. Does anyone know if there is plans in the future to add other platform support to this project? Yes. We will be supporting many platforms with this project. Have you ever written anything for the PS1? No, I have not. Blah238. Have you ever played any of the Space Quest games? Yes, I have. The music for the video of the Handmade Hero site reminds me of it a lot. I can't say I remember the music to Space Quest well enough. I'll have to go listen to it sometime. I don't really remember what it sounds like. Martin Cohen, do you plan doing something with the character spacing in the text renderer? No, I do not plan on doing. What sort of something do you mean? Angry Crow, is Sentinel a design pattern that will help with making the tortoises of the UI independent, or is that terminology that you've gained in years of tool development? Now that I understand what you mean by tearing the interface, it seems really useful for isolating instances of hierarchies. Sentinel is just a word that's used to describe the fact that when you make a doubly linked list, you often use an element of the list as the head and tail pointer. We've talked about this on Handmade Hero before. There's actually an episode where I draw it out and show how the doubly links work. Long video, not a huge deal, but the labels no longer show if clicking on them will expand or minimize them. Also, at a glance, it's not clear what is a category and what is a var. Yes, I mean, like I said, we haven't done any rendering stuff, so this is just complete, you know. Which games console had the worst SDK? That's always Nintendo. Always, if I remember correctly. I'm pretty sure Nintendo always delivers the worst SDK every time and has never been beat. But I could be wrong about that. That's just my recollection. All right. Looks like we're good. Let's go ahead and wrap it up. Wrap it up. There we go. All right, thank you everyone for joining me for another episode of Handmade Hero. It's been a pleasure coding with you as always. Our debug system is coming along quite nicely. Next week, what I'd like to do is start to sort of solidify some of those debug interface elements, maybe draw them a little bit better in a bunch of cases, and start to figure out exactly how to interface with our profile code, since we don't really have a handle on that right now. You still can't use it very effectively, so I'd like to spend some time just working out how we're going to actually have a good interface so that we can see our profiler at a glance and stuff like that. But like I said, we're getting there. We've got some good features in there, and I think we'll be able to, you know, over the next few days, sort of solidify the debug UI stuff into something that's pretty usable. We do have one more major feature to add besides the cleanup, which is that I'd like to add some diagramming support. That's not too difficult really to do, but there are some subtleties to it. So that's the one thing that we don't have in there right now. So that's a feature addition, not just a cleanup situation. But other than that, like I said, mostly at this point now we're at the point where we need to just start focusing on finishing up everything and cleaning it up, polishing it up, so that it's nice and usable and get rid of some of the roughness and the ugliness there. All right. So that's it for today. If you would like to follow along with Handmade Hero, especially since there's a nice big old weekend coming up here and you want to play around with the source code, you can always pre-order the game on handmadehero.org. It comes with the source code so you can play around with it. You can do that right here with this little pre-order button. We also have a Patreon page. If you want to support the video series, you can subscribe there. We have a tweet bot that tweets the schedule at you if you want to catch the series live. We have a forum site you can go to ask questions or check out past episodes if you're interested in something specific that you've seen that I said, hey, we did that on a previous Handmade Hero. That's the place you want to go for that. We also have a conference coming up. If you go to handmadecon.org, handmadecon.org, you can see the first post about it. We just announced it. We have not announced the speaker list yet. We will be announcing the speaker list yet in the next couple weeks, and it is a pretty awesome speaker list. I will say it is probably my favorite speaker list of all time so far, and I still have one more slot to go. So that's going to be pretty awesome. And yeah, if you want to get tickets to that, that is the place to do it. That is it for today. If you would like to see some more Handmade here, I'll be back here on Monday. Don't forget to check the tweet bot for the schedule. It'll probably be 5 p.m., but you never know. I post the schedule on the weekend for the rest of the week, so the tweet bot's the place to check it out. Until then, have a good weekend programming, and I will see you guys on the internet. Take it easy, everyone.